What's up, guys? It's Justin again with another video. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can start to prepare your Death Guard army for the new edition. Trying to mix up my format just a little bit here, so bear with me on this part. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on myself and my history with Warhammer. I started playing around 8th edition, not like the beginning, but kind of early in. Originally I was going to play Grey Knights because I really liked the aesthetic and the style and like the mysteriousness of them and stuff like that. And a friend of mine actually gifted me the index for that edition, and I realized that there was like 7 or 8 units that they could field at the time, and that was like all they had. And I wanted something with more variety, so I was chatting with some friends, and I was thinking about, oh, well, maybe I'll play Space Marines, and I'm kind of glad that my one friend was like, hey, you should check out Death Guard, because I think if I had played Space Marines at the time, I would be an Ultramarines player, and I'm glad that I kind of went and learned a little bit more about what I was doing and what there was out there before I started getting into Space Marines. So he was like, hey, you should check out the Death Guard, and the models are real cool. I think it would fit your style, and I think you would really enjoy them. So I went down the rabbit hole, and I ended up buying a Dark Imperium, and then it kind of kick-started the whole obsession with these guys. I think they look like the coolest models in pretty much most of the 40k universe. So today we're going to be painting this guy. This is a Fetid Bloat Drone. It's a Daemon engine. I'm going to be fielding a couple of these in my army, and I'm going to show you, some quick and easy tips to get you started. You can kind of start and stop most of these processes at any point you like. This is just my interpretation of how to paint these guys, so if you like somebody else's stuff better, you think somebody has better advice, go ahead and follow that. But hopefully you guys can at least take a little something from this. So let's go ahead and get to it. What's up, guys? It's Justin again with another video. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different from what I normally have been doing. Not in the sense that I'm painting something that's not a miniature or whatever, or that this isn't a painting video. But we are going to start some preparation for 10th edition of Warhammer. Now, I'm not a big army gamer. I like to play skirmish games and smaller scale stuff, but 10th edition promises to be quicker, smaller, easier to play, and all of the promises right now appeal to me. So I pulled my Death Guard models out of retirement, or out of I don't want to say storage, but I found where my Death Guard models were, and I started going through them and figuring out what needed to be painted. So this is one of my. This was actually up until earlier this week. It didn't have a face or arms, so those are new. Let me grab my other one. I'll show you. Alrighty, so I got a couple of examples here for you. So the first thing I'm going to show you is my other bloat drone that has been painted. This is one of the first bloat drone. Well, it's the only bloat drone model I have painted, but both of these models are actually the same. This is the snap fit model, but I bought the other model and just kind of put the extra parts on it, so I have 3. So this is the first one I ever painted. It's one of the first Death Guard models I painted. So some of the stuff on the back, it looks good, but I might repaint it. We'll see what happens. But this is kind of an example of what my old standard was. So here's an infantry unit. Pretty much the same idea. A lot of dry brushing. I wasn't quite. This is when I was like brand new into 40k. This is from 8th edition. But more recently, I think last year, I was getting pretty excited about 9th edition, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to play. It was last year, the year before, one of the two. So I started putting together some Death Guard and some Space Marines, and this is kind of the standard I was shooting for with these guys. Now these guys I'm much happier with as far as where they sit and how they look as a whole. This is my Typhus. This is a Plague Burst Crawler. These were painted in pretty much the same fashion with the same colors. I want to go back and fix like the end of the Melta-Guns. That's the only thing I don't like. Otherwise, I'm very pleased with the way these all look. I think that they have a very cohesive style, if you will. Now I'm going to go grab one more model to show you, and that's one I just recently did. And this is my Malignant Plague Caster. This is... I'm kind of in the middle on him. I really like him, for the most part. I think, color-wise, he matches up pretty well. I don't think he stands out too much. I didn't use any GW paints on this. I just used Pro Acryl stuff because I'm kind of on that kick right now. I bought all the paints. I want to use them. I want to see how close I can get to, you know, without relying on like the tried and true GW method and stuff like that. I want to use my own recipes and figure things out and make them look the way I want them to look. So I think, with that said, I think this looks fantastic. I think it looks really good. It matches up pretty well with this guy. I have to do a tiny bit more like weathering and stuff on him. Like I haven't done any like patina effect or anything like that. But besides that, he's pretty much done. I haven't based him. But this is kind of the standard I'm going for, is something like this. Now I've modified this just a little bit into something that's easier to get your base coat on. So here's like my Tallyman. I went ahead and base coated him using my airbrush versus hand brushing everything. It speeds up the first step a little bit, and we're going to go over that in this video. So let me get my airbrush set up, let me put some of this stuff away, and we'll go ahead and get started. Alright, so here's my secret recipe for getting your base coat started. For this, I'm using not a 50-50 mix, but you want to fill half your cup up with flow improver, just a tiny drop of rubbing alcohol, and then we're going to do a little bit of black brown. I'm using this because I want to darken down my green. I want to kind of pull some of the saturation out of it, but I also want it to have that dirty, nasty brown look. And then we're going to do, oh, I think there's a clog. A little bit more green than we did brown. Now, I'm going to take my trusty old jank brush, and we're going to mix this up nice and good, and you're going to get a really nice, deep, kind of gray, desaturated green. Is really the only way I know how to describe it. Now, if I were using my GW paints for this, I would base coat with, I think it's Death World Forest, and then I would take Death Guard green and highlight up to that, and then I would take just a brighter yellowy green. I don't know what they all are, and I would highlight up from that. So there we go. We got a really nice flow. So we're just going to basically coat the entire model of this. Now, some of you are going to say it's not primed. This is actually something I normally don't do, but I wanted to see how it affects paint adhesion on these. So I'm pretty much just doing it on this guy. Everything else that I paint is primed. You can prime gray, you can prime black, it doesn't really matter. Primer is paint. So I won't say that it doesn't matter, because it does. But I I think out of all of my units, this guy just might see the least amount of time on the table, but we'll see. So yeah, so just go ahead and get that base coated, get that everything on the model, and we'll be right back. Alright, so from here, we're going to take Dirty Paint Cup, dark yellow green. We're just going to mix that in there. And we're pretty much just going to hit these in like a zenithal fashion, so kind of from the top. We're not really too concerned with hitting anything on the bottom of the model. And this is going to kind of give us that nasty looking green that we want. I did not put a whole lot of paint to cut. That's okay. It's enough to get us where we want to go. So just like that. So nice kind of mutant yellowy green. So let me go reload the airbrush cover. Alrighty, and as you can see, once that dries up, it kind of mutes it out a little bit. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to do a layer of, if you guessed it, yellow-green over the top. And this is going to be from like a maximum angle. So we're just going to kind of just touch some of these highlight points here. We just want that extreme edge. Because this is going to give us that maximum sickly, gross, yellow-green, and then we can kind of knock things back if we need to. There we go. Something like that. Alright, so here's what everything looks like once it's dried. You can see that, you know, a lot of that yellow-green has kind of muted down a little bit. It's still kind of vibrant, but once you hit it with some washes, it'll dull it down a little bit. It's not going to be so extreme. So I'm going to load up the palette. We're going to put some dark magenta down. And we're going to go ahead and start with base coating some of the fleshy elements. So I'm using a big brush for this. You use what you're comfortable using, but I'm going to base coat all of the skin areas on the model using dark magenta. I'm also going to use this on any of the kind of fleshy looking pipes. So these ones like this. Anything that's not armor or, you know, if you get it on some metal, that's fine. The big thing we want to avoid is the armor we just painted. Alright, so here's what we're looking like. Now, if this was anything else that wasn't going to get 8,000 layers put on it, I would put another layer on this just to make sure that it was nice and saturated. But we're going to use the darkness and the deepness of this, the transparency, to our advantage. So what I've done is I've mixed 50-50 roughly tan flesh into that dark magenta. And we are going to basically like band highlight this section. So we're going to start, you want to get a nice sharp point on your brush, and you want to kind of do little lines. Now for these parts, we're going to follow kind of the contour of the piece. We're just going to make nice, like broad horizontal lines that go across the entire surface. For the pipes, I'm going to do the opposite. So the pipe moves this way, I'm going to go across the pipe like this. And if you overlap a little bit, that's fine. We're going to be doing a bunch of layers of this and this is going to be like the last layer with like the big brush. So go ahead, take your time. This is like the most time-consuming part of these specific models on your infantry and troops and stuff. There's a lot of this stuff, but it's nowhere near as much as this. But trust the process. If you even want to with this step, you could even like block this whole section in here. Just leave a little bit of that last color showing through. So like as you get up against like this little metal thing here, just kind of leave a little bit of that. But if you do it patchy, that's fine too. So here's what that looks like. Far from perfect, but it'll make sense. So now we're going to take that mix and we're going to mix that into a little bit of just pure tan flesh. And yet again, we're going to follow the exact same steps, except we're not going to cover as much. And we are going to try to kind of like, if there's a bunch of places where we didn't put the last coat, we're going to try and kind of go in between. But if it overlaps, again, that's fine. This is going to kind of create that bruised skin look. So again, take your time, bunch of tiny lines. This will make sense the more you do it. Now this is probably the hardest place to do this kind of thing. I think it looks super good when it's done, but it's kind of annoying to see the process because you don't really, it has like a very large ugly phase, whereas other techniques and models and stuff, the ugly phase is a little bit less, I guess would be the easiest way to say that. But trust the process. I think it looks fantastic when it's done. It's well worth the effort in my opinion. It takes a little longer than other techniques like it. Now if another technique works better for you, go ahead and absolutely do that, but this is the way I like it. I think it looks like stretched skin, and it has enough color depth that it looks bruised and disgusting and gross. So this is what I'm going to do until I come up with something better. This is also a really easy way to kind of blend colors a little bit, because the tighter you put these bands together, the more the color that you're currently painting is going to show. But if you space them out, it's kind of like stippling in the sense that it's going to show more of the previous color. So you can use that to your advantage to kind of create color transitions and make things look a certain way. Now there's going to be some unifying steps to this as well, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So I'll be back when this is all done. Alright, so here's where that ended up and how that looks dry. So now we're going to take a flesh wash, and we're pretty much just going to wash over everything. This can be as heavy or as light as you like. You know, you just want to make sure that you cover all of the skin area. I don't think there's any reason to do this like a certain direction or anything like that. Just kind of cover all this up. This will start bringing a little bit of life into that, but we're gonna kind of take it somewhere else from here. It's not just gonna be like, you know, this peachy, pinky, salmony color. But this will kind of help tie those layers together a little bit better. So just grab all these little skin sections, grab the tentacles, grab the tubes, grab the whole everything. It will all come together. Alrighty, so we're kind of hitting the home stretch with this skin business now. So now we're just going to take our pure tan flesh, and we're going to do the same thing again over all of this wash and everything else. You know, this is where it's going to start to actually look like skin. If you want to do a couple layers of this, just keep it nice and thin. And if you really, really, really want to, you can do it on like the tops and anything that light's going to hit. But I'm going to do the whole thing. Yeah, and then we've got one more highlight to do over top of this. So here's what everything looks like once you put that final, well, I say final, but like a proper flesh tone on, a full flesh tone without anything mixed into it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of do like a dead skin kind of highlight. So I'm using olive flesh because it's got much less yellow and orange and other colors in it. It's much more gray and high in white content, so it's going to look like that dead flesh. I'm going to try not to focus this so much in the corners. I'm going to try and keep this in the open areas, but I'm going to use the exact same method I've been using before. As for the tentacles and stuff, I'm going to try and keep it, I don't really know, it's going to be one of those things where when I get to it, I'll see or what I do with it. But just to give you an idea what it's going to look like as you're applying it, I also did some larger bands of that flesh tone up against these metal things, just so that there was like a nice big highlight point. Now the idea here is when you get to this step, none of your original color should be showing, except for maybe around like corners and edges and stuff. But you want to keep that layered effect going, because it's going to create a lot of depth to what you're doing here. It's going to look like there's ripples and veins and texture to the skin, where it's actually just a smooth surface. At least that's the way I feel about it. Now it doesn't matter how thick or thin these lines are. I mean, thin lines is going to take you a little longer, and you'll be able to, you know, get in those nooks and crannies and stuff. But, you know, thin lines are nice too because it creates just a different kind of texture, I guess. But it's nice to mix it up. I do a little bit of both. Some areas I'll just kind of like slap the brush on it and call it a day. Other areas I try to make sure that my lines are a little bit more fine, but it doesn't make a massive difference. But when you're looking at it in person, it has like a different kind of look to it. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up, and then we'll go ahead and finally get on to some of the fun parts of this model. Alrighty, so it's time to have a little bit more fun now. So the next thing we're going to start working on is going to be the horns, the teeth, things like that. So I'm using dark umber. You can use any kind of brown, and we're just going to base coat all of these elements in brown. Now I've seen some people do the teeth details in like that blue-black. You could do that if you wanted to. That would just be like a black or an almost black. And then pick like a navy to kind of highlight up with. We'll be doing a little bit of that on the flies later, so you can basically use those same colors to do your flies. But I like the brown. I think everything looks a little bit more like a tooth to me. I think the spike details are, you know, the ones that you'll, I don't know, they look different. It's hard to just describe, but I'm going to do these like teeth. You do them how you want. But we're going to start by base coating brown. So we'll be back. So once that dries, I'm going to move in with dark golden brown, or just a brown with a higher yellow content, I guess. We're going to start moving it towards where we want it to end up. So you can do horns either way you like. You can either do the tips white or the tips black. I think for this we're going to do the base black and the tip a brighter color. It's just going to make my life a little bit easier. So you just paint the tip. Now for the teeth, I'm going to paint everything, like maybe start like a little more than a third the way up, and kind of make it look like the tops of the teeth is where any kind of grossness is kind of collecting. And for the teeth, I'm probably going to do like maybe 2 coats of this, and then make the second coat like the lower third, just so as we build opacity, we also build a little bit of a gradient. So upper third, then lower third. So we'll be back. So for the next step, we're pretty much going to skip the teeth. We're going to go ahead and switch to golden brown, or a much more yellowy brown, but not a bright yellow, obviously. And we're just going to kind of highlight the horns a little bit further up. Now this is going to be a little bit more of a dramatic jump, so if you want to mix these colors and do it that way, you can, but I think I'm okay with this for right now. So I'm going to start maybe a little less than halfway up each horn, just trying to kind of bring this color in. And I think this is going to be another kind of 2-layer, and then hopefully the wash will unify things a little bit better, because it looks, like I said, it's pretty dramatic right now, but that doesn't mean that it can't be tied in a little bit. So we'll see how it goes. So I ended up doing it on the teeth as well. So here's what it looks like on the horns. Again, I try to do like a spiky pattern, and then I'm going to try and use washes to encourage the transition to smooth out a little bit. But for the teeth, I went ahead and thinned everything down to a glaze, and I just kind of hit that lower third as best I could. So the next color we're going to switch to is going to be ivory. Now I do kind of want this on everything, but also not really. So I'm going to start by putting this on the kind of lower half of the yellow parts of the teeth. And this is a not white, so it's a little bit warmer than white, but since it's the brightest color on the model right now, it reads as white. Now the other thing I want to do here is I want to try, it might not work, it might work, to just kind of edge highlight these teeth on that ridge, just so that we have a nice highlight point for all of them. Now for the horns, I'm going to do just a little bit of this. We're pretty much just going to do like the very tip, and the only purpose for this is to, so we have that brightest point. This, you can skip this if you want to keep it like that kind of bone color, I guess, but I've done it, so I'm gonna stick with it. So we're gonna go ahead and run this through everything, and then we'll be back. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to wash the teeth. So anytime I'm painting like bone or anything like that, I use a flesh wash, because it has, I don't know, there's a certain richness to it that it really makes it stand out a little bit better. So we're going to paint all this with a flesh wash just to kind of bring out all these highlights, make everything look a little bit more together. And yeah, I like the way it looks. You could also use a brown wash. You could use, I don't think I'd use a black wash here, but like a sepia wash might work. I think that might be a little too yellow for my taste, but yeah, flesh wash on these parts. And then, despite the fact that we have basically the same gradient built up on all the horn details, I also just realized I didn't paint any of the extra. I basically painted all the brown on these propellers, but I haven't done any of the extra steps. So if you see a weird jump, I went ahead and did that. But flesh wash on the teeth. Then we're going to take brown wash. Now I think if you're using like an Agrax or something equivalent to that, something darker, I would maybe thin it down a little bit and build it in thinner layers. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit larger brush, just because these parts are so much bigger. And it doesn't have to be a neat brush either. We're going to take that brown wash and I'm going to pull almost from the top all the way down to the base. That's going to start pulling these colors together. Now this is going to be something that is done over a couple of layers, maybe 2, maybe 3, just kind of until you get it to a point that you're satisfied with the transition. Now if you do what I just did there and you put a little too much wash, rinse your brush off, dry it off, and just kind of touch and drag where you want to pull it. It shouldn't be too hard to clean up, so super simple. But this is going to go over all of the horn detail. And this is actually a decent enough wash. I might only need one application, but we'll see what happens. So I'll be back. And while we're waiting for the wash on the horns to finish drying, now's a great time to just come in here and just grab the very bottoms of the teeth with that ivory one last time, just to kind of create that final little bit of highlight. And I think this makes the teeth really kind of pop. There we go. So the final wash step for the horns is going to be a black wash, and we're just going to kind of focus this down on the lower part of the horn. I really want to pull this down into like almost complete darkness, just because I think it looks really good when there's that strong contrast, and I think it really helps kind of sell the transition a little bit better if it goes all the way to the bottom. Now you don't have to do this if you like the way the brown looked, leave it that way, but I'm going to black. So that is our horns and teeth details finished. Very happy with the way these look. I think next we're going to go ahead and finish up the last little bit of non-metallic details. So pretty much the flies and some of the tubes, not all of them, but a few of them. So we'll be right back. So for my cables, the general rule I try to follow, I try not to make all my cables the same color. So any of the smooth cables, which there aren't a ton, especially there aren't a ton that are easy to get to either, I'm going to paint these in Payne's Gray. So this is like a blue-black almost, and then when it's kind of by itself, it looks like a really dark gray. I really like the blue hue to it. Now if you also want to paint some of the ribbed cables, that's not a bad idea either. I wouldn't paint them all. I don't really have like a rule of thumb for this. I would just grab the ones that you think you want to be black, and that would be just the easiest way to handle it. But take your time. There's a lot of details and stuff to work around in this step, and it sucks when you make little mistakes. Now if you make a mistake like down here, nobody's going to see it. But if you make a mistake like up here on the front, it's on the front of the model. Everyone's going to see that. So take your time, be careful, rotate the model, and just work your way around until you've got all those details you want to be that black color. Also going to paint the flies. You can paint the whole thing if you want, or you can just paint the body. it doesn't really matter. We're going to paint the wings blue before we paint them like white or whatever, so it really doesn't matter. Alright, so once you've got all your black details down, or your Payne's gray details, we're going to go ahead and take blue black, which is a lot like Corvus black, I've found. And we're just going to kind of highlight the tops of these things. So for the flies, I'm just going to grab like all these little ridges on his back and like just kind of pick out the details here. Grab his legs. And then for the tubes, I just kind of put like a big chunky highlight running down one side, whatever like is facing up. And then we'll come back and finish off those highlights. So while I'm waiting on those little bits to dry, I mean they're probably already dry, I'm going to go ahead and take dark blue, or a dark blue, and I'm going to base coat the wings. Just for the flies. I'm not going to put this on like, if your model has like actual wings or anything like that, I'm just going to do like any of the flies are getting this. So go. Alright, now I'm going to take that dark blue and I'm going to mix in neutral gray. We're going to do about 50-50, and we're going to just kind of pull that from like the lower third up on all the wings. Make sure we get both sides. What I'm doing is I'm making like a little bit of a gradient here, so it's going to look like it's going from like a dark blue to a gray. Make sure you get both sides, and then if you are not familiar with the way I paint, we're just going to mix more gray into this and just keep kind of layering it up until we end up where we want to be. So there's that. Mix a little more gray in. Excuse me. And then this time we're going to start from like a little more than the lower third. We're kind of stepping into like wet blending territory here, so you might have to load your brush a couple times, but just kind of keep working that up. You don't want to go all the way to your pure gray. We're going to let everything dry, and that's when you're going to incorporate that pure gray. So keep working it up until you're happy, but you do want at least like, I'd say like a 5 to 10%, you know. It should have like that hint of blue still in it when you're done, but you know, keep highlighting this up using wet blending, and you know, pull that gray towards the ends. And you probably could just go ahead and like mix like a drop of blue into your gray and just wet blend this from the beginning, but I like the progressive approach to this. I think it looks a little smoother in this case, just because it's such a small area. I get a little bit more control over where everything's blending and where it's sitting. I think the last one. Oh, I broke that spike off. I knew it was going to happen. Something like that. And then I think one more little round of gray should take care of us. Got a little bit of water in the a little too high up in the brush. That last little bit. ahead and let that dry. Now I'm also I got a little bit of blue right here. I'm gonna try and sweep that up a little bit. I don't think that's gonna happen as well as I hoped it would, but that's okay. You know, I'll fix that later. It should be pretty easy to fix. But that's something to consider, is that you might get a little blue on some of your other parts. So, all right, so I'll be back and we'll go ahead and start finishing up some of these details. All right, and again, while we're waiting, we're gonna go ahead and just take that medium gray, I think it was. There it is. Neutral gray, sorry. And we're just going to kind of pick out the highlight points on the flies. So like right up here on just the tippy top, like a tiny little line on the back, if they have like that big detail. And then for the ones that have all the bands and stuff, you just kind of just grab like a little section and just pick out that same section on the fly running down. A couple spots on the tops of his little legs here. And that's that. You know, pretty much same deal with the wires and stuff. You can do like a little bit of a kind of a dot highlight, or like a very thin line on the top, just to create the impression that there's that little bit of highlight. But you don't have to go crazy, just a real thin line. There we go. So, alrighty. So then the last thing is we're going to take a little bit of ivory. We're going to mix that into our gray. You could just use a lighter gray if you wanted to, but in the interest of not adding a bunch of extra colors to the palette for no reason. And I'm going to sort of edge highlight these wings. It doesn't matter if it's thin or thick. It's, you know, it'll be fine. So just kind of a little edge highlighting here. And that's going to kind of, you know, sell the impression that these are like that translucent kind of gray wing type of deal that you would see on a fly. And just take your time working around these. So I'll be back. Alright, so I've gone ahead, I've painted the base of the eyes in Payne's Gray. You could do black if you want. Again, I didn't want to add a bunch of extra colors to the palette for no reason. So I've used burnt red, and I just kind of dotted in the eyes of the flies here. That's probably as far as they'll go. And then for the lenses, I'm using red, kind of going to an orange. I'm going to choose my light direction. So we're going to go top right. I'm just going to put a little dot. This is thinned down a little bit to a glaze, so not full intensity dot here. And then I'm going to drag from this to the opposite corner and just kind of make that little like U shape. And the reason we're doing this in a glaze is it's, first of all, it's going to create a gradient for us, but second of all, if we mess up a little bit, it gives us a couple tries to get that opacity built up a little bit. So something like that. I'm going to zoom in a little bit for this one. So now we're going to take a brighter red, and we're pretty much going to do the exact same thing. We're just going to kind of glaze that in, so just a little dot in that little highlight in the eye, and then like a little glaze down here in the corner, just cover a little bit less area. And hopefully that dries nice and kind of transparent for us. And then the next one we're going to do is going to be orange. Alright, and then this is where things start to get a little tougher, because we want to just create a smaller dot than we have before. And then that glaze is going to be also in a smaller area. So just kind of try to use the tip of your brush if you can. And then the last step for this is I'm going to use ivory. I don't want to go to pure white. I mean, you can, you definitely should, but I'm also still not interested in adding extra colors I don't need. So this ivory is going to be my white, and as long as I don't put anything on the model that's brighter than this, it will read as white. So just like that, and then like a tiny little dot on the opposite corner in the center. Something like that. And then if you wanted to, you could glaze over this whole thing with red to create that like overall red impression, and it'll kind of smooth that gradient out for you a little bit. I think I might maybe do that, possibly. I'm not sure. I do like the way this looks, but I also do kind of want it to read, you know, as red. So let's see. So test it on our thumb, just make sure that it's nice and transparent. Not too intense, and then we just kind of glaze over the whole thing. I'm going to pull my color to the bottom just because that's where the big part of the highlight is, so I want most of that paint to be deposited down there. Yeah, that looks awesome. Now, some people put a gloss varnish over top of this. I don't think that's a necessary step. I mean, if you want to do it, obviously go ahead and do it. But to me, you're creating these intentional effects and these layers, so you don't want to alter the way light interacts with your model to further, because like if you put the highlight in this corner and it comes to the bottom, and then you put a gloss coat on it, and then the light's on this side, it's going to look really wonky. So that's my take on it. I like matte coat on everything that's not metallics, and that's the reason I save my metallics for last, is if I want to put a varnish over top, it doesn't interact with any of the metallics I've placed, and then I can put metallics on top of that. So that's pretty much, I believe that's everything besides like slime that isn't metallic on this model. So from here we're gonna start popping in some copper, some like iron effects and stuff like that, and we're gonna start finalizing everything for this guy. I'm very happy with the way he's coming along so far. Alrighty, so here's where we are. If you wanted to matte coat, this is a good place to do it. Most of everything is painted in the colors it's going to be. The only exception you probably might have noticed is I haven't done any washes or anything on the green parts, and that's because I plan on doing like a messy wash after everything, and I'm pretty much just not going to hit the face area here and then like the skin if I can help it. So now's a good place to put your varnish down if that's what you want to do. Now you could very easily have washed all this stuff and then gone back, but if I find it easier, just do one wash over, because a lot of the metallics is going to touch the green and it's just going to save you a lot of time. So I'm going to use kind of an average sized brush here, nothing too small, nothing too big. I'm going to start with my areas where I need to be more careful, and I'm starting with dark silver. You can do copper first, you can do dark silver first, it doesn't matter, but we're just going to base coat all the areas that we want to be those colors. So propellers are going to be silver, this gas mask thing is silver, this syringe tip, these blades on the mower, exhaust, you know, all this stuff. I'm gonna do these little these little band things in silver, and these are gonna be kind of a pain in my butt because the detail kind of like wraps around them a little bit. So not a huge deal. If you get a little bit of silver on there, just let it dry. If you can't clean it up real quick, just let it dry. Go back with one of your skin tone mixes, just kind of do a couple of those layers around that area, it'll be fine. And I'm also going to do a bunch of these cables and stuff in silver. That way I can give everything a black wash and a brown wash, mix that up a little bit, and create some grimy elements to help kind of sell the nastiness of this whole thing. So I will be back when all these silver details are painted. And just like that, this looks so much more complete. But we still have to do the copper details. There's not a ton of these. We've got like all these little things that are around the turbines. There's one up here. And there's some on the front of this. Some of the carapaces have, like this one, have like this thing on the front. So trim detail and stuff like that. And then just kind of miscellaneous things. I'm not seeing anything immediately on this one, but you know, like the little Nurgle icon hanging off the back, little stuff like that. So just grab whatever copper details you want to grab, and then we're gonna start bringing this one home. So I guess I can show you. I'm using spoiler alert, Pro Acrylic Copper. You might need 2 coats of this depending on how much you thin it, but hopefully your copper has good enough coverage that you're one and done. I hate painting metallics for this reason. Silver is usually not too bad, but it's your brighter metallics that seem to give me the most trouble anyway. But yeah, so we're going to go ahead and paint all this copper, and we'll be back. Okay, so we finished all the metallics. Now I went back and did a little bit of extra detailing on some stuff that I missed, and just realized I missed another thing. So, you know, make sure that all your details are painted out. We're going to grab these real quick. But the next step is going to be washes. So let me fix these last 2 things, and then we'll go ahead and do some washes. Alrighty, so what I'm going to do now is I've taken a bunch of brown wash, and I've thinned it down a little bit, not too much, and we're just going to kind of wash across everything except for the horns and the face, and you know, all that stuff. Try not to let it pool a ton. If you get a little pooling, that's fine. I think in this is one of those rare instances where a little bit of pooling will kind of help your case a little bit, just because these guys are kind of meant to be gross and disgusting. Just don't let it pool too much. Yeah, if you've got like a gigantic deposit of wash sitting like that, you don't want that. You know, you want to spread that out a little bit, but let it pool just a little if you want. I mean, you don't have to. I think it kind of goes without saying that this is not a more traditional style painting video, as most of mine aren't. I don't like to do the whole edge highlighting 17 times and all that stuff. There's nothing wrong with it if that's something you're into, but it's just not for me. So we're gonna go ahead, wash over all this stuff, and then we'll come back and I'll tell you what's next. Alright, so the next step, we're going to take a black wash, and we're going to pretty much do the same thing. Now, I'm going to focus a lot of the heavy washing over some of the metallics. This is where we're looking to switch from creating grime to creating definition. So you really want this places where you want there to be clearly defined lines and darkness and stuff like that. So anything that's got a lot of detail in it, like these propeller blades, is a really good spot for this. You can also throw, I wouldn't go throw a ton of it over the copper, but like maybe just grab like the bottoms of these spikes or around rivets and stuff where things would collect naturally. I'd treat it more like a regular wash in these cases and use it more in like a pin wash fashion, just so that you don't have a bunch of like really strong black spots over your brighter metallics. I mean, unless that's something you're going for. We're going to be like touching this stuff up later anyway, but you know, it's less grimy looking and more like it creates that definition. We can also throw some of this in some of these little pock marks, and we can kind of stipple it in some areas. I'd try to keep it like lower on the model to kind of help create that like shaded look, but you know, I think the big key here is to be a little bit more sparing with this particular wash. That's really what I'm trying to drive home here. But use it where you want it. Again, I would try to avoid your tentacles and stuff like that. We spent a long time doing that like pretty early on. Now that said, that some of these tentacles do have like these little pipe details in them. Go ahead and grab those. Just use the tip of your brush, just poke at them, because we're going to highlight all that stuff. And then hoses and stuff like that, you'll probably want to put a heavier black wash on anything that's like a hose. So use your discretion, figure out where you want some of this stuff. Remember, brown for grime, black for definition. And, you know, we'll see you after the wash dries. Alrighty, so you could probably leave things right here if you wanted to, but I'm going to go a little further. I'm going to kind of re-highlight some of this stuff, cover up areas where maybe the wash did a little too much. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I just want to re-pick out a few areas where I don't like how the wash is sitting, basically. Do a couple highlights maybe, but I'm not going to go too crazy. I'm not going to spend a massive amount of time on this. The big areas I want to hit are like the flat areas. Oh, my brush is splitting. But you know, larger, flatter areas, I'm just going to kind of do the same thing like I did with the skin. I'm going to kind of like draw in these lines to kind of create the impression that like dirt and stuff is built up over it, but it has been scratched, or it's received some scratches, just so it's not so plain. You can do these either way you want. I'm going to grab the highlights on the edge of these spikes, some stuff like that, and this is just kind of to get things ready for the next step, which is going to be a silver highlight, and that's going to be like my damage step. So anything that I want to be like weathered, we're going to hit with a silver, and I think this is the only place we're going to deviate maybe from using our Pro Acrylic paints. We're going to probably jump into some Vallejo, but we'll see. So I'm going to go ahead and do this highlighting step. You probably won't see too much of a difference because it's copper on copper, but maybe you will. Alrighty, so like I said, probably not a ton of change here between what I did the last step, but now we're going to come in with silver, and this is Pro Acryl silver, and I'm just going to highlight first of all some of the spiky points on these little things here, and then I'm also going to like kind of stippled edge highlight some of these copper areas just to kind of make it look like there's wear and tear on it. As for the rest of the bits, I'm going to kind of treat this as just a highlight. So I put my light source in this direction based on the eye, so I'm just going to highlight like over here, and I'm really just going to use this to help pick out and define some of the other areas. And we're going to bring this back down later, so it's not a big deal that it kind of looks a little weird right now. But we'll address it all going forward. I'm going to put just a tiny highlight up here. And, you know, just, again, work your way around the model. Put your highlights where you want them. Grab edges, little things like that. Don't go too crazy here. You don't have to, you know, highlight everything. You don't have to repaint all the metallics. Now, if you want to create separation between, like where this has this little ring thing around it, you know, paint that silver. That's fine. Because that'll make that stand out a little bit more. But remember, wherever you're going to put effort is where people are going to start looking, especially when it comes to color separation and things like that. So, you know, it's important to have the focus of the model be the face, but, you know where to place your details, know where to spend your time. You know, this is the main area, so like where the eyes are and then the blades, and that's probably a good point to talk about too. We can grab these blades here. I'm just going to edge highlight the back end of these, and then you know, maybe we'll come back and do the fronts as well, but I'm only going to do the ones that are visible. So I'm going to highlight all these silvers and we'll be back. Alrighty, so this is pretty much where you could leave it if you wanted to, but there's just a tiny bit more things that I'm going to do here to kind of push things to that next level. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some golden brown and I'm going to paint in all of the pimple things, I guess. So any of these little boils or whatever, we're just going to paint them in that yellow color. From here, this could be quite a time-consuming thing to do. We could refine the flesh just a little bit if you wanted to. There's some rust effects we could throw down on some of the metallics, and then there's painting slime. So that's a pretty decent chunk of those done. So once you get that done with the golden brown, we're going to take ivory. We're just going to put it on the tip of the brush, and you really just need a drop. We're just going to dot the center of those boils with ivory. Now you don't have to go crazy. I really, you know, the only ones you really need to grab are the big ones. So from here, we can go back to one of our original tones. We can take that dark magenta. We only need just the littlest drop. I'm going to thin this down to like a glaze. Like dirty paint water glaze. So something like that. I'm going to glaze this into all of these corners of the skin, and hopefully when that dries it kind of looks a little bit more like the skin is bruised from where it's being pulled into these little tight corners and stuff. I'm also going to put this glaze up here towards the top of the tentacle detail, just so that where it's butting up against the teeth, it stands out from the teeth a little bit. And we're going to do a little bit more with that in just a minute. We're going to grab this one real quick. And then if you want to grab these other ones, you can. It's up to you how you handle this. To me, it looks more like, or the idea behind this is, it looks like it's growing out and it's changing as it's growing out. So just try and feather that a little bit. Another thing we can do is to make the tentacles stand out a little bit more. Take royal purple, or any purple that you like. We're going to do the exact same thing with that. So again, you're going to thin that down to like that real thin glaze consistency. Not much to it. And I'm going to put that on the other end of my tentacle. So like it's turning into a purple. So it's a little bit of a fleshy tone, and then it's not a fleshy tone. It's purple. Now what this is doing for me in particular is this is tying all the colors I'm using on my other Death Guard units into this model. Because I do have a little bit of purple. I actually build, when I do my cloaks and cloth and anything like that, I go from a purple to a magenta. So this will put that little bit of purple, just a touch, on these as well. And most of what we're doing here at the end is going to be glazes and stuff anyway, so now we will be using a couple of effects paints, but use what you have available to you. So now I'm thinning down some, this is orange I want to use. I think I want to start with burnt orange. This is going to be like rust. So again, this one can be a little bit thicker of a glaze. And we're just going to kind of deposit this around areas where there's metallics. So like I'm going to dump this on these rivets here. I'm going to put some of this on this little band thing here. I can tuck some up under here. And this is going to be like a really nice basis to put other rust on. So anywhere you think that rust might accumulate, go ahead and drop some of this in it. You know, rivets are always a safe bet. Any kind of like detail like that. These guys over here. Corners of stuff, you know? Grab these propeller blades. Now this is a little harder to do just because of the shape of these propellers. It's a little bit of a nightmare, but you can definitely get in there and do it. You can put rust on the armor. I think I'd be a little bit more careful about this, just because I'm not really sure what this is made of, and you know, I mean, it's your model, so it doesn't really matter, but I just don't think I'd go super crazy putting orange washes over green. Just be kind of selective with it. Yeah, something like that. Now you can rust just about anything you want. I don't think I would do like every single rivet, but I'd get a bunch of them. Any of the cracks and stuff in the armor, or any of the details that have like that cracked look,
Go ahead and throw a little wash in there. It'll always look nice. Break things up a little bit. If there's flat areas, I don't think there's too many of those. Like down here on the bottom, you can just kind of like stipple it a little bit, just to look like a little bit of rust has collected in it. Otherwise, I try to keep it around panel lines and in nooks and crannies and stuff. And a little bit will go a long way. Grab some of these pipes. Stuff like that. I think I'll stop right there for right now. I'll finish this part when I get off camera. But now we can go ahead with the lighter orange and basically do the same thing. Hit a lot of the same areas again. And just, you don't have to hit the whole area, just kind of grab it and, you know, pick out some of these new areas. Grab some new areas. Mix it up a little bit. This is going to create that varied kind of rust effect. And then the last color we're going to use is going to be jade. And this is going to be for that like patina effect. Around the copper. So same type of deal. Another glaze, kind of heavy, and then just focus this in cracks and crevices, around rivets. You know, throw some in some of the flat areas. Easy peasy. So I'm going to keep working around the model. I'm going to figure out where I want some of these effects to be, and then I'll come back and we'll throw some blood effects on the flesh mower, and then I think we're ready to call it done. So I'll be back. Well, I forgot a couple of very crucial things that we still need to do. So one of those things is there's a lot of slime and stuff around the model. So like right here, the tentacle is kind of slimed onto the carapace here. Just look around the model, see if there's any of those slime details. There's probably at least one or two. Another big one here are the horns up here. I saved this for last, just because of all the washes and stuff. So just kind of grab that, stick it in there. This is bright yellow-green, I think. Or it might just be regular yellow-green. Either way, use like a neon greeny kind of color. Fill that in. And then once that starts to dry, we're going to come back and we're going to hit it with that color again. But this time we're going to mix in just a little bit of yellow. So grab that yellow green, mix in a little bit of yellow to it, lighten it up a little bit, and we're just going to progressively like add more yellow to the mix and just kind of highlight inside of it. That really ran down. That's okay though. There's a whole bunch of it up here. But yeah, so that's the idea behind that. The last other thing before we do blood effects is I like to take my medium or my dark tone for my armor and just kind of stipple in around areas that might be a little too dark, just to create a little bit of variety on the surface. And that should dull down a little bit once it dries. You don't have to go crazy and do like the whole entire surface, but just kind of pick around some areas, feather it out here and there. I'm going to get like the middle of these little circle details here. Just kind of tidy up where the wash like pulled a little bit and there's like that hard edge. Just just mix it up a little bit. It's not super serious. Yeah, so those are the two last big things we need to do before we do effects. Okay, so we are insanely dirty and gritty and gross looking. I'm very happy with the way this has turned out. I think there's lots of really cool transitions in here. It looks nice and grimy, as Death Guard should. It's not too over the top. The only thing I think I'm going to change next time is, instead of using copper, I think I'm going to switch to brass. I think that'll give me a darker, a little bit deeper look, something I'm looking for in the trim. But I'm not dissatisfied with this. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some Blood for the Blood God over the mower blade. Now if you have Uhu glue where you live, or I think it's called E6000 or something like that, that's a really good alternative. Put a little bit on and do all that. But if you have access to those products, this is a good place to use them. Get those blades nice and gross. And you're pretty much ready to hit the battlefield. Now, obviously, he's not based yet. I'm going to do basing in its own video, I think, just because, my basing is a little more involved, and this is a long enough video. I don't want this video to go on too much longer, so we're just going to wrap it up here, I think. But yeah, so this is where we're going to leave this guy. Lots of blood on his little blade here. It doesn't have to go all the way into the base, but try and get the blades. That is what's doing all the cutting. And if you want to throw a little bit on these spikes, not a bad idea. But there is our fetid bloat drone, ready for battle. Now this is probably, if you're army painting, this might be a little bit higher than like a tabletop standard. Not a lot higher, but a little bit higher. I really strive to have like a fully painted to like a decent standard army. I enjoy the painting process. I enjoy the gaming process too, but the painting process is where most of my enjoyment with this hobby comes from. So it's where I spend the most time. I'm going to snap some photos and put them at the end of this. But follow this process, and this is hopefully what you'll end up with, something along these lines. I am beyond stoked that this guy came out as good as he did. And just to show you, I want to show you compared to the one I did originally. And not that I dislike this one, but I definitely think I've come a very long way since painting this guy. And this is kind of like a little sneaky peek of what the basing scheme is.
So yeah, pretty good. I'm happy with that. We got one more to go, and then all of our demon engines are finished. And then it's pretty much troops and our good friend Mortarion. You know, he's like my centerpiece. So eventually we'll get to him, but I'm using him as a treat. I think once I get through the Poxwalkers, then I'll paint him to like kind of get myself back into my happy zone, because I've got a bunch of Poxwalkers. But yeah, so there's what we got, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Check out my links in my bio. Subscribe, follow, share it with your friends, and we'll see you with the next video. Later.